Hi, Randy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Randy, one time I stopped by your gym. I doubt you remember it. It was in Vegas. It was a long time ago. And we had like an hour-long talk about USA Wrestling and what it would take to compete. And sure enough, yesterday, the U.S. team went 4 for 4 at the World Championships. Jordan Burroughs getting a medal. Jaden Cox, I believe, getting a medal. Let's see, David Taylor getting gold. It was truly, Ben Askren was saying, one of the best days in the history of the men's freestyle team. You got to be on cloud nine, huh?
Yeah, amazing to watch. I feel like right now we have the best rules uh, for USA Wrestling and USA Wrestling style of wrestling. Some of the best athletes on the mat at this time, and we're in position to make history and win back-to-back world championships, which will be remarkable.
When was the last time the men's team did that?
I don't think we ever have. In fact, I think the last time we won the world championships was back in 1995, before last year. So we're definitely on a roll like a hunchback doing somersaults right now.
I've never heard that one before. I'm going to take that one with me. All right, so you're with the PFL. Let me ask you: the championships will be New Year's Eve day, but the regular season and the playoffs are now over. Your impressions so far of how the season has gone?
Well, I've been very impressed with these athletes and how they've stepped up. They've embraced the grind of this format, and really just it's been so much fun to watch, to talk about, and be involved with this year. So many great fights, so many guys stepped up and just really put it on the line, and it's been very exciting.
The benefits of the tournament are guys like, let's see, Ray Cooper coming out of nowhere, 2 Jake Shields wins, and of course some other ones as well. I'm wondering though, from your vantage point, if you could make a couple of tweaks to how the system works. Like, I see a lot of belly aching about the first round being the tiebreaker. Is that the best way to adjudicate things, you think?
I get why it was set up that way. I mean, you got to establish some criteria if you're going to fight a 2-round fight. There's a chance that those fights are going to end in a draw. And you know what? Why not first round? You can make a case, uh, come out strong, get after it, make it happen. Now, the downside to that is some guys have recognized that they've won the first round clearly, and then they shut off in the second round. They coasted out. They're okay with getting the draw, knowing they have the criteria in the bag. So that's something I think we maybe need to look at, think about, and obviously these fighters are game. If we lay it out there, they're fighters. They're going to figure out a way to make it work for them.
One of the things I love that this tournament is revealing is that you get a guy like Vinny Magalhaes, right? He'll be fighting Sean O'Connell in the light heavyweight finals. He's got one fight to win $1 million. Same with Sean, by the way. And Sean I work with at SiriusXM. But you've got Vinny and Sean one fight away. And in the case of Vinny, he's not trying to be somebody he's not when I think he was in the UFC, some slug it out on the feet kind of guy. He's in there pulling guard. He's getting back to his roots. He's fighting the way he wants to fight. I think the tournament format works for him. Not everybody works in every organization's format, I think is my point, Randy. And a guy like Vinny is thriving in the PFL rules.
Yeah, you know what I like about this format is there ain't no amount of smack talk. No, if your style is a Sean O'Connell style, where you're going to try and instigate that firefight and hope to land that left hand and put a guy out, then this is your format. If you're a guy like Vinny Magalhaes, who is going to try and find a way to put you on the ground and use his strength in that jiu-jitsu to submit you, this is the perfect place for these guys. They can go out, be themselves, and it's merit-based. It's about winning fights and finding a way to get a guy where you need to get him to beat him.
Okay. A couple of things I wanted to check in with you about, and I look forward to seeing those finals on the 31st. The commentary gig. You're really good at it, Randy. That's no news to anybody who's been watching you do commentary for a while. How much are you enjoying it?
I'm having a blast. First of all, it's a great crew, a great group of guys from David Gibson and George Greenberg, John Furtatis, all these guys, all the way down to the guys I get to sit at the desk with. How can you not be excited sitting next to Boss Rutan? The guy's energy is contagious. Todd Harris is an absolute professional. Eve Edwards, Caroline Pierce, they do an amazing job of kind of bookending us, and everything flows. It's just a lot of fun.
Would you say that PFL is an organization that is based on what fighters want an organization to be based on?
Sorry, repeat the question.
Yeah, no worries. I'm saying, is it fair to characterize PFL as an organization that, like, if fighters had their way and wanted to create an organization, this is basically what they would create? Is that a fair characterization?
I think that's a pretty fair characterization. I think if the fighters had their way, they might have a little more time in between fights. Maybe not have to turn around quite as quickly as they're turning around at 6 weeks, but I think they've adjusted. I think they figured it out and dialed it in, and they're certainly getting after it. So again, I think you eliminate a lot of the BS. You don't have to talk smack. You don't have. I mean, if you want to do that, you can do that, but to make it based on winning fights and the merit of your ability to go out there and do what you've trained to do, I mean, that's the way a fighter would want it for sure.
All right, so let's transition if we can. What is the latest that you know of with the Ali Act to MMA?
My understanding is that the lobbyists with the UFC were very clever, got to some people, and they kicked the Ali Act and our motion to get it amended to a different committee now. So we're basically in a position where we're kind of had to start all over, door knocking and doing it now instead of with Energy and Commerce, which is where the original Ali Act was and where we have been working for the last 2 years and made great headway. We're now kind of starting over with a whole different committee. It's something to do with education, which doesn't make any sense to me, but so many other things in politics don't make sense to me either. So we're basically back to talking to congressmen in that committee and trying to get it put up to be voted on in that committee.
Is there a timetable?
I mean, we've been at this for 2 years. We're pretty tenacious. We're a fighters organization, so I think we're going to be at this as long as it takes. Anyone we really speak to sees it right away. It's a no-brainer. Why shouldn't we enjoy the same protections that boxers have been enjoying since the 90s to protect us from promoters that are out to try and take advantage of the fighters? It's pretty simple. So I just think it's a matter of time, but how much time, there's no way to tell.
That's it. I didn't know about that committee, that it got moved like that. When did that happen?
That just happened in the last few months, as we've rolled into this year, and then the new Congress, it got kicked out of Energy and Commerce where we've been working.
Now, I know this sounds like an unnecessarily political discussion. I don't mean to make it that way. Do the results of the impending midterms at all affect the chance of that being moved through committee, or no?
I don't think anything that happens with regard to which side of the aisle Congress and the Senate fall in these midterms really affects it, because we had a ton of support on both sides of the aisle. It's interesting if you're talking to somebody that seems to be on the Democratic side of the aisle. If we start talking about healthcare, these fighters making more money and being having to fight less, which is better for their health. They're taking less shots to the head. They're in hard training less. A person on that side of the aisle gets it right away. If we start talking about a free and open market, competitiveness, all those things, that's the conversation I'm going to have with a Republican, somebody on the other side, the more conservative side of the aisle. But both sides of the aisle see it clearly, see that it needs to be amended. And, so you just have to kind of know your audience and who you're talking to and what those button issues are for folks, depending on which side of the aisle they're on.
When did Joe Kennedy III get involved?
Joe's been involved from the start. He's been a big advocate. He's friends with Mark Wayne Mullins. They train together at the gym there. And so Joe has been a sponsor of the amendment since the beginning with Mark Wayne Mullins from the Republican from Oklahoma.
Interesting. I thought it was relatively recent. That's quite an interesting pair, Mark Wayne Mullen and Joe Kennedy III. But I guess that's what you're looking for, right? Bipartisanship.
Well, I mean, you absolutely have to have bipartisanship, and again, I think Joe gets it. He understands. He's a fan of the sport, and certainly fighter safety and fighter healthcare are something that he understands.
Randy, real quickly, what do you make of the efforts of Leslie Smith and Project Spearhead? Have you guys had any discussions together at all about anything?
I've spoke to Leslie a couple of times. Obviously, she was involved with the MMAFA early on, and then she's kind of jumped to a couple different ships, all in a way to, I think, attempt to get a collective bargaining agreement for athletes that are signed with one of the promotions, obviously the UFC. I think that's short-sighted. I think it's not taking into account all the other fighters that aren't signed with the UFC. I think the union model doesn't fit. We're 1099 independent contracting employees. We're not employees. Collective bargaining agreement and a union suggests that we're employees of the promotion. That does nothing but solidify the UFC's monopoly in the sport if we got a collective bargaining agreement and tried to form a UFC union. So I just think that's short-sighted. It cuts out a lot of fighters like these fighters that are fighting in the PFL or fighters that are fighting for Bellator that won't enjoy the protections that they deserve from coming together. I think a fighters association is a model that fits a lot better.
Where does Bellator come down on the efforts of extending the Ali Act to MMA? I've heard a lot of different rumors. What do you know about their involvement or lack thereof?
I think been supportive. Obviously, my son fights for Bellator. I've done some brand ambassador stuff for Bellator in the past. They've at least verbally been supportive of the movement. Obviously, about 90% of the revenue in the sport comes through the UFC, and Bellator, PFL, these other organizations are fighting over the other 10% of the fighters and the revenue that come in. So anything that levels that playing field makes it more competitive. I mean, why shouldn't the Bellator heavyweight champion, whoever wins this fight between Bader and Emelianenko coming up in the Grand Prix, be able to market and pursue a fight against the heavyweight champion from the UFC? That's a free and open market. That's what would happen in boxing. But that because of the exclusivity of the contracts in our sport and the lack of protection that the Ali Act provides, that will never happen in our sport. And that would be a huge fight. That would be an amazing thing.
All right, speaking of interesting fights, I've got to get your opinion on this. As you know, two of your former foes, Chuck Liddell and Tito, are going to be fighting. I looked this up. Did you realize that Chuck is older than Oscar De La Hoya, who was the one promoting the contest? I didn't even realize that until I had verified it. But your impressions of their, like, what? I don't know how to ask this question other than what do you make of what's happening?
Well, I mean, I'm not too concerned about the age, honestly. I fought right up to where Chuck's at right now at a high level. My only concern with that is that Chuck hasn't been competing, hasn't been sparring, hasn't been doing anything in the fight realm other than regular strength and conditioning for the last 8 years since he retired. So that puts the pressure on him to get back up into fight shape, back up and get the timing back that we're used to seeing Chuck have going into a fight. And he had that style where that timing was very, very important. It wasn't that he's the biggest, strongest, or best athlete. He had a very unique timing to find you right out on the end of one of those long levers and make it a short night. Now, whether he still has that timing, that's the question. Now, Tito rather has been active. He fought twice last year. He fought Son, and he's been in some big fights with Bellator. He's been very active. He's still in fight shape and in fight mode. So, it's going to be interesting. I think they're still huge names, both of them, marquee names that anybody who's a fan of the sport recognizes. And maybe this is the start of the Masters division of MMA.
Did Golden Boy contact you? Have you been approached to come out of retirement?
I actually spoke with both Chuck and Tito. I'm friends with both those guys, and they're interested in me possibly commentating the fight, which would be fun. I would have to get an exception for my PFL contract to be able to do that, which I'm not opposed to asking for. I think it would do anything but help the PFL and get more exposure as Golden Boy kind of starts, and this may be a one-off with Golden Boy. Who knows? I'm hoping it's successful for both these guys and the promotion, because it doesn't hurt to have more options, more places for fighters to go and be a professional fighter.
And who wins on November 24th?
Well, like I said, I think that the onus is always on the guy who won the first, and both, obviously the first two fights Chuck won. What's he going to change? What's he going to do? Now, the real hard question is, what kind of shape and what kind of timing is Chuck going to bring into this fight after being off for the last 8 years? So I think the challenges are really there for Chuck Liddell. Is he capable of getting in there and getting it done? Yeah, absolutely. I think anybody who knows the sport is crazy if they count him out, but I think he's up against it a little more than Tito is. Tito's been way more active, had some big fights. Will he be able to go out and implement his game plan, which has got to be getting in Chuck's face, finding a way to get Chuck on the ground and take some gas out of Chuck? Certainly not standing and trying to trade with Chuck and find out if he does have that timing. So I think it's going to be interesting.
All right. Well, I hope you're there commentating. No one knows those two quite like you. And you've been doing a fantastic job for the PFL. I've really enjoyed your commentary. I cannot wait to see the finals on New Year's Eve day here at New York City. Yeah. So congratulations on all your success. I'm glad you're still relevant in the community, and keep us updated on the Ali Act. We're looking forward to seeing what happens with that as well.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me on.